The night was quiet, but Ayan's mind wasn't. Books lay open on his desk, pages full of words he had already read 3 times and still couldn't remember. The clock ticked louder than usual, reminding him that time was slipping away. Exams were close, pressure was heavy, and the fear was familiar. He wasn't lazy, he wasn't dumb, but no matter how long he studied, it felt slow, painful, and frustrating. Somewhere deep inside, a question kept echoing. Why does studying feel so hard when others make it look easy? Ayan had tried everything people usually recommend. Long study hours, late nights, motivational videos, even copying toppers' routines from the internet. Still, his focus broke every few minutes. His memory failed him when it mattered most. He blamed distractions, blamed social media, blamed himself. What no one told him was that the problem wasn't effort, it was the method. He was playing the game of learning with the wrong rules. One evening, while scrolling mindlessly, Ayan came across a short clip that stopped his thumb mid-air. It wasn't loud or dramatic, it was calm, almost dangerous in how simple it sounded. The idea was shocking. Studying fast isn't about rushing, it's about removing friction. Learning faster isn't about pressure, it's about alignment. The words felt illegal, not because they broke laws, but because they broke everything he had been taught about studying. That night, something shifted. Instead of forcing himself to memorize, Ayan observed how his brain reacted. He noticed when his focus was strongest, when information stuck, and when it slipped away. He realized most students don't fail because they lack intelligence. They fail because they fight their own brain. Schools teach subjects, not learning techniques. They test memory, not understanding. And the biggest lie students believe is that more hours automatically mean better results. As days passed, Ayan experimented quietly. He shortened his study sessions instead of extending them. He changed how he read instead of how long he read. He stopped highlighting everything and started asking better questions. Something strange happened. Concepts clicked faster. Revision took less time. His confidence grew, not loudly, but steadily. For the first time, studying didn't feel like punishment. It felt controlled. But with every improvement came a new tension. If studying could be this efficient, why wasn't everyone doing it? Why were students still burning out, pulling all-nighters and feeling stupid for no reason? Ayan realized that fast learning isn't shared openly because it challenges systems built on struggle. When you understand how focus, memory, and attention truly work, you stop glorifying stress. You stop worshiping long hours. You start winning quietly. This wasn't about hacks or shortcuts, it was about mastering fundamentals that most people ignore. How the brain filters information, why repetition fails without recall, why multitasking kills productivity, why focus is trained, not forced. Every small insight felt like unlocking a door that was always there but never explained. Studying fast stopped feeling illegal and started feeling logical. Still, doubt lingered. Would this work under real pressure? Would it hold during exams, deadlines, and exhaustion? Anyone can feel confident in practice. The real test comes when the clock is running and the room is silent. Ayan knew the next phase would decide everything. Either this approach would collapse under stress, or it would prove that learning faster isn't magic, it's skill. As exam week approached, the stakes rose. Friends panicked, notes piled up, anxiety spread like a virus. But Ayan did something different. He closed unnecessary tabs, opened only what mattered, and trusted the process he barely understood but deeply felt. Every study session became a deliberate move, not a desperate one. And that's when he realized this journey wasn't just about studying fast, it was about taking control of time, focus, and self-belief. What happened next changed how he saw learning forever. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Because the moment you understand how to study so fast it feels illegal, going back to old methods becomes impossible. And the real question isn't whether this works. The real question is what happens when you finally stop studying the hard way and start studying the smart way, right when it matters most. The next morning felt different, not calmer, but sharper. Ayan woke up with the same pressure sitting on his chest, the same exams waiting ahead, but his thoughts were no longer scattered. Instead of asking how long he should study, he kept asking how his brain would respond to what he was about to do. That small shift made everything feel unfamiliar, almost risky. Years of conditioning told him that if he wasn't exhausted, he wasn't studying properly. Yet here he was preparing to break that belief without knowing the full consequences. As he sat down with his books, he noticed something unsettling. Most of what stressed him wasn't the difficulty of the syllabus, but the sheer volume of it. Chapters blurred together, topics overlapped. His mind panicked before it even began. This was the real enemy of focus: overload. Nobody had warned him that the brain shuts down not from lack of ability, but from too much input without direction. Studying fast, he realized, starts with deciding what not to study. Ayan began paying attention to patterns. The same concepts appeared again and again in different forms. Teachers emphasized certain ideas without saying why. Exam papers followed hidden structures no one talked about openly. It felt like discovering a map that was always there but never shown. The mystery deepened when he realized that most students were running harder on the same broken path, while the real shortcut wasn't speed but clarity. Still, doubt crept in. What if this approach failed when pressure peaked? What if focusing less time meant forgetting more later? Every quiet moment was followed by a surge of anxiety, reminding him of past failures. His brain fought to return to familiar chaos because chaos felt safe. Slow studying felt honest, fast learning felt suspicious, almost wrong. He noticed how distractions lost their grip when his sessions were intentional. His phone stayed silent not because of discipline, but because his mind was finally engaged. This wasn't motivation, it was momentum. Concepts stuck because he understood why they mattered. Memory improved because he stopped cramming and started connecting ideas. Productivity wasn't forced, it emerged naturally. But something was missing. Ayan sensed that understanding techniques was only part of the equation. There was another layer, something deeper that separated average students from high performers. It wasn't intelligence, it wasn't luck. It was how they thought during pressure, how they handled confusion without panic, how they stayed calm when time was running out. That skill wasn't written in books or taught in classrooms. As the days moved closer to the exam, the silence grew heavier. Everyone was busy revising, memorizing, stressing. Ayan felt like he was standing at the edge of a decision he couldn't undo. If he trusted this way of studying, there was no turning back. And if he was wrong, he wouldn't just lose marks, he would lose confidence. What he didn't know yet was that the real test wasn't the exam itself. It was the moment his mind would freeze under pressure, and whether these new learning techniques would hold when everything was on the line. Ayan's confidence grew, but the pressure around him didn't disappear, it only shifted shape. The real conflict wasn't the syllabus anymore, it was the fear of being judged. His friends teased him, saying he was too relaxed, like calmness was a sign of weakness. Teachers warned him not to rely on shortcuts, as if speed itself was a bad habit. Even his own thoughts questioned him. What if I was just fooling myself? What if this method only worked in theory and not in real exams? The doubt became louder than any distraction. At the same time, another story was unfolding beside his. His classmate Zara, who always scored high, was seemingly struggling too. She stayed up late, eyes red, but her marks were slipping. Unlike Ayan, she didn't have a strategy, she had only effort. She was the smart one everyone trusted, yet she was quietly losing control. Ayan noticed it and felt a strange mix of sympathy and fear. If Zara could, with her reputation, struggle, then maybe the whole system was broken. There was also the pressure from home. Ayan's parents believed in hard work, not smart work. They didn't understand why he was changing his routine. They thought he was taking risks. Every time he explained, their worry grew. The conflict wasn't just inside him anymore, it was everywhere. And the exam week was closing in like a storm that couldn't be avoided. The week before exams felt like walking into a dark room without a light. Every step mattered and every mistake could cost him. Ayan's new method was working, but it wasn't a miracle. He still felt tired, still felt the weight of expectations, still felt the fear of failing. The difference was that now he knew what he was fighting against. The real enemy wasn't the syllabus, it was the panic that made his mind freeze. He could feel it approaching, like a storm. One evening, the school announced a surprise mock test. The announcement hit Ayan like a punch. It wasn't scheduled, it wasn't expected, and it was the kind of pressure that could ruin anyone's confidence. His friends started panicking, rushing to revise everything at once. Zara, who had been struggling quietly, looked like she was about to break. Ayan's heart sank. This was the moment when his method would be tested under real stress. If he failed here, his confidence would shatter completely. If he passed, he would finally have proof that studying fast wasn't a lie. On the night before the mock test, Ayan tried to sleep, but his mind was loud. He remembered every time he had doubted himself. He remembered his parents' worried faces. He remembered his friends calling him too calm. He remembered Zara's tired eyes. He realized something chilling. This wasn't just about exams. It was about proving to himself that he could win without burning out, that he could learn without suffering. As he walked into the exam hall the next morning, his hands were shaking. The room felt colder than usual, and the silence was thick.
Every student was tense, every heartbeat loud. Ayan sat down, opened the paper, and felt his chest tighten. The first questions were familiar, but his mind felt strangely distant. He tried to focus, but a wave of doubt hit him like a wall. In that moment, everything he had built over the last week felt fragile. The tension reached its peak. And then, just when he thought he couldn't handle it anymore, something unexpected happened. Something that would change everything, but also leave him questioning if he was ready for the truth. Ayan stared at the paper, heart pounding, and then he noticed something that made his blood freeze. The first page wasn't just difficult, it was different. The questions were not from the chapters they had been studying. The format was unfamiliar. It felt like a test designed to trap students who relied on memorization instead of understanding. His mind raced, trying to find a pattern, trying to recall anything he had learned. The calm he had built started to crack. He looked around and saw other students struggling too. Some were flipping pages frantically, others were sweating. Zara, sitting 2 rows ahead, had her face buried in her hands. The room wasn't just tense, it was chaotic. It was as if the exam itself was a challenge to the whole system. Ayan realized the mock test wasn't meant to evaluate knowledge, it was meant to expose weaknesses. And that meant the real conflict wasn't just his method, it was the pressure system that forced students to perform under impossible conditions. Ayan tried to breathe, to focus on what he had learned, but his brain kept asking the same question. What if this method fails when the test is designed to break you? He tried to apply his fast learning technique, but the unfamiliar questions made him doubt everything. The thought of failing wasn't just about marks anymore. It was about losing the trust he had built in himself. Then, halfway through the test, a whisper spread through the hall. Someone had heard that the mock paper was leaked. Not just leaked, changed at the last moment. The teachers were hiding something. Ayan's stomach twisted. If the exam was manipulated, then the whole system was rigged. And if it was rigged, then no amount of studying would matter. His hands started to tremble. The air felt heavy, like the room was closing in. The pressure wasn't only external anymore, it was inside him. His mind was trapped between the fear of failure and the need to prove that his new method was real. And then, in the middle of that fear, Ayan saw something he couldn't ignore. A small note on the desk beside him, left by someone he didn't want to be noticed. It wasn't a cheat sheet, it was a warning. A warning that the real test wasn't the exam. The real test was what would happen after it. Ayan held the note in his hand, his eyes scanning the small handwriting. It wasn't a cheat sheet. It was a message from someone he didn't even know, a student from another class. The message said, "Don't panic. The paper is made to confuse. Focus on concepts, not memory." At first, he thought it was a prank, but the message hit him like a shockwave. It was the same advice he had been living by. The fact that someone else knew it too meant one thing: he wasn't alone. For the next few minutes, everything shifted. The fear didn't disappear, but it stopped controlling him. He stopped trying to beat the paper. Instead, he started solving it the way he had trained, by understanding, by connecting ideas, by breaking questions into small pieces. He didn't rush, he didn't panic, he just worked. Slowly, the exam began to feel less like a trap and more like a puzzle. Zara, nearby, looked up and caught his eye. Her face was still tired, but her expression changed. It was the first time she looked like she believed in herself again. Ayan realized that his method wasn't just helping him, it was creating a new way of thinking in others too. The room felt different now, like the pressure had lost some of its power. When the time ended, the silence returned. The teacher collected papers without saying a word. Everyone left the hall with the same blank expression, unsure of what had happened. Ayan walked out with a strange calm. He didn't know if he had passed, he didn't know if his method would work in the final exams, but he knew something important. He had faced fear without collapsing. That evening, Ayan received a message from the anonymous student. It wasn't a congratulation, it was a challenge. If you really want to study fast, meet me tomorrow after school. I have something to show you. Ayan felt his heart race again, not from fear, but from curiosity. He didn't know who the person was or what they wanted, but one thing was clear. The real journey was just beginning. Ayan stood outside the school gate, the late afternoon sun making everything look ordinary, even though his mind felt anything but. The day had been a storm of emotions, fear, doubt, relief, and something like hope. He looked at his phone, waiting for the next message from the anonymous student. His friends had already gone home, and the street was quieter than usual. It felt like the world was holding its breath, waiting for the next move. Then the message came. Meet me at the library. Don't tell anyone.
Don't tell anyone.
Ayan hesitated for a second, but curiosity won. He walked to the library, heart racing. When he entered, he saw Zara sitting at a table with her books spread out. She looked up and smiled, but it wasn't the tired smile from earlier. It was a real one. You got the message too? She asked. Ayan nodded. Yeah. Zara's eyes flicked toward the corner of the library where a boy was sitting alone. He looked like any other student, quiet, focused, almost invisible. Ayan had seen him before, but never really noticed him. He stood up, walked over, and placed a small notebook on the table. You're Ayan, right? I'm Asan. Asan explained that he had been studying the same way for months. He had noticed how students struggled with overload and stress, so he started testing a new study system based on understanding, focus, and recall. He didn't share it openly because he didn't want it to become a trend or a shortcut, but when he saw Ayan working differently, he knew he had found someone who could handle it. Zara listened carefully, and then she said something that surprised Ayan. She said, I was wrong, she admitted. I thought you were just calm. I didn't realize you were learning in a smarter way. Her voice was quiet, but honest. I want to try it too. They spent the next hour discussing how to study fast without losing understanding. They talked about focus techniques, how to break down difficult topics, and how to avoid burnout. The conversation wasn't about shortcuts, it was about building real skills. Ayan realized that the real lesson wasn't just passing exams, it was learning how to learn. When he finally went home, his parents asked how the mock test went. He didn't have a perfect answer, but he didn't feel guilty anymore. He told them the truth. The exam was hard, but he learned something more valuable than marks. He learned that pressure doesn't break you unless you let it. He learned that studying fast isn't illegal. It's possible when you use the right method. As the days passed, Ayan's confidence grew. He continued his new study routine, and Zara joined him too. Their friends noticed the change, and some started asking for help. The classroom atmosphere shifted slowly. It wasn't just about exams anymore. It was about understanding and growth. In the end, Ayan didn't just survive the exam, he changed his approach to learning, and that was the real victory. Thank you for watching the video. Please subscribe to my channel.